Hello, and here we are, self-care shorts. Um, find us at shortsmedia.org, alongside our other stuff called social work shorts. I say our and us, it's just me really, but there you go. Sounds good, doesn't it? But anyway, you'll catch us there, shortsmedia.org, and on the Self Care Shorts YouTube channel, which is where you're watching this. And there's also a Social Work Shorts YouTube channel as well, and there's various substacks and the like which you'll come across. Best thing to do is probably to follow me on Instagram, because that's where I do most social media, and on there I am at SJ Mordue, Mordue. So you find me on there. We're going to talk today about work-life balance, which I've talked about many times before, but I'm going to do it again for the sake of completeness, because we're talking about the book Pillars of Success for Social Workers. I like the kind of tagline, small steps in a complex world. I like that, because that's what we've got to take, small steps. We can't go rushing at things. Don't worry about the fact it's got social workers in the title. Everything that I'm talking about on the videos is very generic. The book, actually, if you were to buy a copy of the book and read it, you would read some bits about social work. And actually, one or two of the sections coming up utilize social work research about social workers and emotional labour and the like. But what I've discovered is you can find the same problems in all person-facing professions. So it's very generic. So anyway, rethinking work-life balance. In the book, the tagline for the chapter, or the section, is an integrated approach to a fulfilled life. Thinking these things through. So the term work-life balance, it's everywhere. And it's talked about as though it's this ultimate goal to achieve personal satisfaction and professional success, and you balance the two things against each other. And that's the problem with this concept of work-life balance. It carries that inherent problem that we tend to think of getting one out the way to get to the other one, get work out the way to get to life, and then we do life, and then all of a sudden we've got to give our life up to go back to work. Well, that just doesn't work, does it? You know what I mean? Because in reality, there are elements of life in work. I'm doing this right now, recording these things, and this doesn't feel like work, quite frankly. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I could talk about it all day long and it would never feel like work. It always feels very life affirming. So, and I'm sure when you get that report finished, help that family, teach that child something or other, I'm sure that's very life affirming, and it feels like life. And I'm sure when you got your hand down the toilet, because you're cleaning it, not that that's just something you'd regularly do, but you've got your hand down the toilet cleaning it, or you're doing the ironing or the washing or stacking the dishwasher or whatever it happens to be, I'm sure it doesn't feel much like life. I'm sure it feels like work. So this idea that work and life are separate is a strange one. So we need to be critical of this concept and come to the conclusion that what we're after is some sort of balanced life, rather than balancing one thing against the other. Life, work is a source of identity and passion, and it's often where our community part, or a significant part of our community, exists. And I think if you're in one of these person-facing professions like social work, the professional journey is or can be, hopefully is, a deeply fulfilling experience. The idea, it gets called a calling sometimes. These professions are a calling, and it creates a thing called calling energy, which is a well-researched thing, that when you feel called to do some sort of profession, it generates energy. There's an interesting kind of problem, that when you feel, the more passionate you feel about a job like this, the more likely you are to have burnout. Well, why is that? Well, that's because you kind of go too far, don't you? Because there are people on the end of what you do. You always do the extra bit. And I guess that's the reality of the job. However, you've got to balance that against having this balanced life. We talked about well-being. Last time we talked about holistic productivity. Well-being rooted in holistic productivity. Productivity is not just what you do in the job. It's the productivity across all of the kind of spheres of life. So the concept of work-life balance kind of places a pressure to create some sort of perfect kind of compartmentalized equality between work and life. And I'm gonna say this the reality of it is, for any working age adult working full time, work is always going to win, because you're meant to be asleep for 8 hours a day. Yeah, we'll probably come to that in a future episode. You're meant to be at work for asleep for 8 hours a day. You're then going to be at work for 8 hours a day, aren't you? And sometimes you might be there for longer, which only leaves at best 8 hours to do all the other stuff, all the life stuff that feels like work, and all the life stuff that feels like life. You've got 8 hours to do that. And all right, you've got your weekends when maybe you're not, when you're hopefully aren't at work or thinking about work. But so apart from on a weekend when you still have life stuff to do and work life stuff to do, you've got this job that is going to consume you. And I'd argue sometimes, make this argument, that actually part of professional life is that sometimes the job does consume you. And we have to be all right with that. We have to be all right with reading about social work, or reading about medicine, or reading about nursing, or reading about teaching outside of work. I'd argue, because, well, we're not going to get a chance to do it in work, are we? But we need to be informed. We're professional people. We need to be informed. And yes, you should get time to read about things in work, but you're probably not going to. And that's a problem that we've not managed to fix in decades, which tells me that it's maybe unfixable. And one of the things I point to when I talk about this is me and my friend Gareth. When we talk about, he talks about medicine because that's his thing. I talk about social work. But whenever we're talking about other things, a bit of philosophy or whatever, we always link it back to work, because we're he's a doctor and I'm a social worker, and so we always link it back to work, because we're always thinking in those terms. How does this affect my job? And I'm not sure it's a bad thing if it overwhelms you, but it's not a bad thing to try and think, what have I just learned there, and how does that impact on my life and my job? Because remember, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. And if we go back to thinking about eudaimonic self-care, which we talked about a few episodes back, go back to eudaimonic self-care, that developing yourself, your knowledge, your awareness of things to inform your life across the piece, so your work life and your life, So I think we have to integrate this idea of life and work to just life, with work being part of life, not dividing up our time between this thing and this thing, because we feel cheated when we do that, and rightly so, because work takes up more time in reality, for most of us. And then we have those insights that I've just talked about there outside of work that kind of lend themselves to something in our work time. So we just need to rethink this work-life balance thing, more of a holistic understanding of how work and life and everything that comes in them enhances our well-being, going back to the previous episode. So we need to integrate them and have this different perspective, I'd argue. So this notion of work-life balance is reimagined, so it's not a battle for our time and our energy, but a way to orchestrate all the moving parts of life to be greater than they are as individual things. So not life versus work, but just life. Opening the door to being more authentic, flexible, and having fulfilling lives over the whole part of our lives. Take care. Speak next time.